scholars here, the Israelites, they were freed from ancient Egypt. Is that correct? Correct. And this signifies when we have a Seder, which is usually the first night, and I think even the second night of Passover, which is 8 nights. See, I paid attention. Or seven nights. What this signifies is that they are kind of celebrating the exodus of ancient Egypt. Is that correct? Yes. There we go. Checkbox. And you're going to get into the details. And the matzah, which is unleavened bread, which I see we have some. It's just pretty much flour and water, right? And it did not have time to leaven like bread because they were exiting out of ancient Egypt. I did that in like 4 sentences. Was that pretty good?
Very good.
Excellent. So there's a lot of different traditions. Like I always say, there's a lot of different types of Jews. There's Ashkenazic and there's Sephardic. You guys remember us talking to who was here for Hanukkah when we did some? The Ashkenazic, and then of course the Sephardic. It's kind of the area where you're from, the cultures, the type of food. Sephardic is where my father and Shimshon, he was born in Israel, for those of you guys who didn't know, Dr. Hardoon, and he moved here when he was 16 to New York. But Sephardic is more of like around the Mediterranean flavor. I know a lot of people that are Greek. I have some friends that are Greek, and a lot of the food is really similar. It's that hot area all around the Mediterranean. Ashkenazic is more of that European influence. And what does that mean? It means the food, like we didn't grow up eating matzo ball soup. Later on I did because, my mom and I see Dr. Chan there. Hey, Dr. Chan. But the matzo ball soup was more like an European flavor, the Ashkenazic flavor. So, Dr. Hardoon, what's a type of food that you can mention that's Sephardic? Falafel. Has anybody had falafel? It's really similar to like heroes or gyros, right? We're
made out of matzah. They changed the name. Matzo ball soup, and then they have the matzo ball pancakes, and they have the
gefilte fish. Everybody knows gefilte fish.
I hate the smell.
I hate the gel.
And chopped liver.
Oh my God.
I feel like
You like that,
paparazzi.
huh?
So so we went ahead. Do you like gefilte fish?
Thank
I
you.
dropped dead just from the smell.
That's funny.
Wow, fancy stuff.
That's the brand I use.
This shows you on your special plate. Oh, on your special plate that you all have in front of you, you can put your matzahs on it, matzahs, and you can see the actual what the meal is, the Seder meal. You have the horseradish, the shank bone. You have something unpronounceable there, and bitter herbs, and some vegetables there. And it's probably the horseradish that makes Eric sweat. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Now the matzah is very hard and very dry, so it's hard to kind of eat it that way. And
Call it a Haggadah, or how do you say it in Hebrew? Haggadah. And this is, I remember as a kid at Seder, we would have this, and this is kind of going through, because, it kind of, why don't you give the technical of exactly what the Haggadah is?
it's a prayer book that details some of the experiences of the Israelites escaping from Egypt. And there's some prayers in there, and Shimshon has better idea than I do.
Do you want to come on up here, Shimshon? So he's going to explain some of the prayers. I'm putting you on the
Go
spot.
ahead.
You got one. So what is this prayer? What does this mean?
All of their procedure when they get out from Egypt. First they were a slave, and you see, read this text and.
So what he's going to do is, this is basically talking about, this is in English, and I'm going to start, and I don't think anybody has any of the books here, but this is page 11, and again, we're doing this all for education purposes, so I'll read this first little paragraph in English, and then he'll give you the Hebrew version, because in our house, they're from Israel, so they spoke, and they still do, spoke fluent Hebrew. I don't speak it. I only know the bad words. So it's definitely interesting. So in our house, it was always growing up probably a little different than a lot of other people born here in the United States, because it was all in English. So this is the one. I'll read it in English, this one paragraph, and then you'll get to hear the Hebrew version. We were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and our God brought us out with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. And if the Holy Blessed One had not brought our ancestors out of Egypt, we and our children and our children's children would still be in slavery to the pharaohs of Egypt. Therefore, even if we were all wise, knowledgeable, and sagacious, and learned in the law, it nevertheless would be incumbent on us to tell us of the departure from Egypt, and all those who expand the telling of the story are accounted praiseworthy. So I will have you read this in English, and he's going to do it a lot faster than my English.
You mean in Hebrew?
I mean in Hebrew.
עבדים היינו לפרעה במצרים, והוצאנו אדוני אלוהינו משם ביד חזקה ובזרוע נטויה, ואילו לא הוציא הקדוש ברוך הוא את אבותינו ממצרים, הרי אנו ובנינו ובני בנינו משועבדים לפרעה במצרים. אפילו כולם חכמים, כולם נבונים, כולם זקנים, כולם יודעים את התורה, מצווה עלינו לספר ביציאת מצרים, וכל המרבה ביציאת מצרים, הרי זה משובח.
And the first strike that God hit Egypt was blood. What does that mean? Every liquid in Egypt turned blood. So he said, okay, stop it. So it was stopped. And then the Pharaoh changed his mind and he said, no, I'm not letting you go. So the next one was frogs. So Egypt was hit with thousands and thousands and thousands of frogs everywhere. You go in your kitchen and there are frogs. You go in the bathroom, there was no such thing. The outhouse, and there were frogs. So Pharaoh said, okay. And then when that went away, he changed his mind again. So this went on with multiple strikes. And then the last strike was the Israelites were told at the entrance to each house they should mark with a hand. So if they slaughtered a sheep, they would take the blood and put it on the hand and then put it at the entrance to each of their houses. This way, when the last strike on Egypt comes, where every firstborn was going to be dying, God will pass by those Israelites' homes because of the mark of the hand on the door frame. So if you look at the name Passover, that's where it comes from, passing over the Jewish houses. And after this last strike, Egypt, the Pharaoh gave in, and he let the Israelites leave. When they left, after they left, he changed his mind again, and he was chasing them. And that's one of the reasons they couldn't leaven the bread, so it was unleavened. But when he chased them, they came to the Nile, or whatever river was there. The Red Sea. Red Sea, sorry, I forgot. I'm getting too old. And basically, God let them cross, and after they crossed, as the Egyptians were following them, the Red Sea came back, and a lot of them drowned, right? If anybody's been to Universal, they have, where they filmed it, that scene in the movie Moses, and you could actually see it. It's really cool.
And that's the Universal in California, I'm assuming, right?
I believe they had it here, but I may be wrong.
Yeah,
It may be
because I
just
think
in
it's in California, yeah.
We went around inside Jerusalem and the area around it. We came to a big room with steps going up, and when we got there, our tour guide told us that that's where Jesus had his Last Supper, and the Last Supper was a Passover.
Correct. That's what Eric was saying.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
Eric, you were there too.
Yes, I do remember that. I do remember that. So it's it's kind of reliving the story as the whole Seder actually happens. I remember as a kid, and I know you say it's some fancy Hebrew word, but for me it was finding the matzah.
Afikoman.
That's how they say it. Afikoman. Did I say it right?
Yes.
It would be hidden, and when I was younger, it was easily found, and then it got harder and harder. And it was to the point, right before I moved out, they were hiding it behind picture frames on the wall. I mean, it was intense. So, I know
It's basically a game you play with kids, and whoever finds it gets some money.
I see you, Laura, nodding your head. Did you find the matzah? Yeah, and it's always, hey, what do I get? It was first promising a toy, then it was, hey, this is great, and then all of us, then it went into money.
And everybody got it, all the kids.
And now that's what my kids, is this the money holiday, Dad? Growing up around,
How long was your Seder? How long was your Seder at your house?
so it all depends. There were certain memories of the family that I remember going to, like Saida, and some, where she even got me to eat cow's brain. I found out when I was older, like, what the heck did I eat? It was really salty. But those are the ones that they would end the wee hours of the night. I remember falling asleep on the couch, and it was like, wow, this is hardcore. And it wasn't that it was extra orthodox. It was just, they're all from Israel, so they really drag it out. Then there were some Seders that we've gone to that were like an hour.
Yeah.
I would say average is 2 hours maybe. But it's with the food. The praying part goes pretty fast. It's going around, and of course there's a lot of people in his family, like we go to his house.